we're live streaming. Conservative HQ is our main sponsor, and we want to thank them. And they are live streaming today on the web, so we want to welcome all of our viewers by the web. We also, again, want to welcome you, the audience who've made no small sacrifice to come here on a beautiful Sunday afternoon to listen to the candidates. And the candidates, I have tremendous respect for people who run for public office. It is not easy. It costs money, it takes time from your families, and you're bearing the burden of these issues where others can go about their business and enjoy their lives. And so regardless of what happens here, gentlemen, I thank you for being willing to do that. We want to also thank our sponsors, because we have a lot of them. And as I call the sponsor names out, will you guys please stand so they can see who you are? Conservative HQ, our main sponsor, if you represent them, please stand. Hold your applause, please. Allen West Guardian Fund. American Family Association, I'm standing. ARC Network, Center for Security Policy, Citizens United, Eagle Forum, Family PAC Federal, Family Research Council Action, Connie back there, Freedom Works, GOH Conservative PAC, Gun Owners of America, Secure America, Secure America. Now, I'm not going to argue with you then. You're a gun owner of America. I better be careful. Whatever time you say it is, I'll look at you. Smart Girl Politics, Star Parker, Tea Party Patriots, True the Vote, Voters Trust, Tea Party Patriots Citizen Fund. Thank you to everyone. And then, all right, let's give our hand to all the sponsors. And let me read their names, and if you'll stand, if you're representing them, it's Virginia Tea Party Patriots Federation, Prince William County Tea Party, Northern Virginia Tea Party, Fairfax Free Citizens, Virginians for Quality Health Care. Anybody? All right. Well, thank you very much. Thank you so much for being on. We have a lot of media here today. We're not exactly sure. We know that Breitbart is here today, represented by Carrie Pickett and Steve Bannon. Thank you, Breitbart, for all your coverage of this event. And at this time, I'd like to welcome the President of the Center for Security Policy, Frank Gaffney, who's going to lead us in the pledge. Will you please stand?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Why don't you stay standing for a second, and let's just, I'm going to pray. Some of you have from a different faith background. I understand that. I'm going to pray as a Christian, so let's bow our heads. Father, we thank you so much for the beauty of this day and for the fact that you remind us through nature and through all the blossoms that there is something that transcends all of our worries here. So, Lord, give us perspective, and we want to just recognize who you are and that you transcend all of this. Lord, give us wisdom and help us to decide who is the best candidate to replace Congressman Frank Wolf. Lord, thank you for this opportunity to gather, the freedom of it, and we want to thank you for that too. And all of this I pray in Jesus' name. All right, I'd like to introduce for you now the candidates who've come today. And from left to right, Barbara Comstock could not be here for a family commitment. Steve Hollingshead, Howie Lind, Bob Marshall, Bob Setter, and Rob Wazin. And those are our candidates. We are so lucky to have a special guest today. I know that many of you came because of him, and I don't blame you, because Chris Plant is a favorite of, I would maybe even gets to millions in the Washington, D.C. area. Chris joined WMAL after 17 years at CNN, including nearly 10 years assigned to the Pentagon, covering the U.S. military and intelligence communities. That explains why you have so much knowledge about the planes and all those details, Chris. It's wonderful. He was also a Pentagon correspondent, senior producer for national security affairs, military affairs producer. He traveled extensively for CNN, covering defense-related stories from Saudi Arabia and Bosnia to Vietnam, Indonesia, Africa, and the remote corners of the former Soviet Union. Chris received the Edward R. Murrah Award for the Radio and Television News Directors Association for his reporting from the Pentagon during the terrorist attacks on September 11th of 2001. And most recently, Chris got a wonderful recognition from Talkers Magazine, listed as one of the country's most popular talk hosts in the Heavy 100. And among those, you can imagine, Rush Limbaugh, Mark Levin, and others. So Chris has now joined that. My understanding is that his ratings in DC have he's actually gone past Rush and some of the... I've been doing radio for a number of years. I love talk radio. I don't think I've ever heard anyone who has more talent at talk radio, more knowledge, a better memory, a better ability to assess the facts, to correlate, to interact with callers. I'm amazed. Every day he hits the mark. And so we are so fortunate to have Chris as to share coffee with us every morning and night, even if he doesn't know we're all there. And let's welcome a very big, warm welcome to Chris Plank.
Well, welcome all of you. Thanks for coming out and participating in our sacred democratic process. I know that everyone's going to learn more about the candidates here today, and hopefully the candidates are loaded and ready for bear. I have no doubt that they are. I think that the program here will move things along pretty quickly. A couple of the gentlemen up here I know personally, Bob and Howie, and the other guys I haven't met personally, but I'm not going to, it's not rigged or anything. So don't worry about any of that. And the format is we're going to start with an opening statement from each candidate. I'm going to try to keep everything to 1 minute. That will be enforced by a person behind the curtain with a taser. Just to keep things moving along. And then we're going to begin the questions, and we're going to start on the far end. The first question will go to Steve Hollingshead. The same question will then be answered by the candidates down the line. The second question then goes to Howie Lind. The third question goes to Bob, and continues to travel around that way, kind of clockwise, except they're in a straight line, but you get my drift. And I'm going to have to wear my reading glasses for at least a portion of this. Otherwise, I might get a word wrong, and that could lead to a problem. We also wanted to welcome in the crowd a Democrat Party, what do they call them? Minders? Trackers. There's a Democrat Party tracker here in the crowd. We know the person is. We want to welcome that person. Also, I just want to remind people in the audience that tonight, because of the format, we're not taking questions from members of the audience. Outbursts, and there's another report that there might be some kind of a troublemaker in the audience. Maybe throwing a shoe or something. Like that. So says his wife won't be here. No spontaneous outbursts, please, from the audience, because there are also people in the audience with tasers. Not really. But it'd be fun if there were. And with that, I believe that we're ready to go to the opening statements from the candidates. And as I said, we're going to begin at the far end, 1 minute opening statements, beginning with Steve Hollingshead. Steve.
Thank you for sharing caring enough about our country's future to show up today. I'm Stephen Hollingshead. We are losing more and more of our freedoms every day, and that has weakened our economy. It has weakened us abroad, and it has made us afraid of our own government here at home. We don't need the government to solve our problems. We need the government to stop causing them. Now, how am I different from all the good folks up here and the one who's missing? I'm the only candidate in this race with broad business experience creating jobs and meeting payrolls. I'm the only candidate in this race who's ever reformed any government to the tune of $2 billion a year in welfare fraud we stopped at HUD. And I'm the only candidate in this race who's ever taught the Constitution of the United States. And if we want to get this country straightened out, we need to take this document across that river and stand up to the Washington establishment, stand up to the career politicians of both parties, and stand up to Barack Obama and tell them all, stop.
And next up is Howie Lind.
Thank you, Chris, for moderating this event today. It's great. And thank you to Richard Biggery, Conservative HQ, and all the other organizations sponsoring it. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Howie Lind. I'm going to dispense with my normal remarks that I've been giving for, seems like forever now. I'm just going to cut right to the chase. There's two issues right now before this election on April 26th. Delegate Barbara Comstock supported Medicaid expansion. She voted for Barack Obama in 2008 in the primary. I did a radio ad this last week on the Medicaid expansion. They went apoplectic over it, of course, against me personally, but they took it off their website, and now the debate rages. She voted in the 2008 primary for Barack Obama under Rush Limbaugh's Operation Chaos that was supposed to be for Hillary Clinton, not for Barack Obama, and it was 3 weeks before. He announced it 3 weeks after the Virginia primary. I put the question to you, out of these candidates up here, who is your conservative establishment to go against the conservative candidate to go against the establishment? I say that I am that candidate, and I'm asking for your vote on April 26th. Thank you.
And next up is Delegate Bob Marshall.
Chris, thank you very much. My first memory of politics is when I came home and after I finished writing for Sister, I think Imelda, I Will Not Talk in Class 100 times with taping the pencils together. I turned the television on and expected to see Howdy Doody. To my surprise, I saw some guy saying, "Objection, Mr. Chairman, objection." I thought, what was this? It turns out it was the Army McCarthy hearings. I actually got into this much more than Howdy Doody in the Buffalo Bill. So, well, that was my first introduction. My second introduction was when I watched the Democrat convention in 1972. By the end of that, and I worked for Jack Kennedy in 1960. By the end of that convention, I was convinced not only was I not a Democrat, I was not on the planet with these same people. This party had left me. I found a home by reading Whittaker Chambers' book Witness and voting for and working for Ronald Reagan. Thank you.
And next up is Mark Sabin.
Well, Bob, I'm sorry to say I remember Howdy Doody a long time ago. My name is Mark Sabin. Thank you, everyone, for being here today. I know it's a beautiful day outside, and it took a lot of effort to come here today. You know, we have an election in 2 weeks, just a little under 2 weeks, and we all know the problems that we're having in Washington. We've all sat in front of our television set and said, throw them all out. And the problem is that it's our fault, because we keep sending the same type of person back to Washington every 2 years across this country. What we need is term limits, number one. We need somebody who comes from Main Street. We need somebody like myself who's been a business owner for 30 years. I don't have any government experience, but I have Washington experience as the president of a trade association that has testified before Congress numerous times, defending small business, defending consumers. So I'm the only one on this panel that has not worked for the government, has not been in the legislature, and I think we need to break the mold and try something new. Thank you.
And next up is Rob Lossinger.
Thank you, Chris, and all of those in the audience. It's no surprise, at least not to my fellow candidates up here, that there's someone missing today. Barbara Comstock has skipped virtually all Tea Party and conservative events, and she hasn't been telling you the truth about who she is. Last week, as Howie mentioned, it was revealed that she voted for President Barack Obama during the 2008 primary. At the time, she explained it away, saying it was part of Rush Limbaugh's Operation Chaos. The only problem with that explanation is, it's not true. In reality, Rush Limbaugh's plan was to vote for Hillary, and he launched it after Virginia's primary. Comstock got both the intent and the date wrong in her cover-up to explain why she'd support one of the most liberal presidents in history. In the immortal words of Congressman Joe Wilson, "Barbara, you lie." She also hasn't been honest about her political lobbying, her support for elective abortions and Obamacare, and her advocacy for corporate kickbacks to her wealthy friends. We simply cannot afford to send a lobbyist to Congress. We need a real conservative, someone who is not afraid to tell the truth and fight the establishment. On April 26th, I'd like your vote.
This whole politics thing is rough, isn't it? All right, and the questions that we have tonight, we're not going to be able to cover every single issue under the sun in the time that we have available, but the questions that we have were submitted by constituents who signed up, who RSVP'd for the event, and were invited to write questions that they would like to have asked of the candidates. And so we selected questions from those submitted by constituents, and those are the questions that we have here. And again, your question may not be in here, but not every question could be asked. And the way that we're going to do this, once again, beginning with question number 1, we're going to go to Stephen Hollingshead and and then we're going to move this way. Everyone will answer the same question. Try to keep it to a minute each, and there may be a follow-up if there's grumbling or anything like that. The first question comes from Chris in Gainesville, who asked that Republican leadership in the House of Representatives recently released a set of immigration principles that focus on significantly increasing legal immigration and granting legal status to illegal immigrants with a promise of future enforcement. Most Americans believe that enforcement should actually come first, and immigration levels should be reduced right now in light of job shortages and the real unemployment rate in America. What do you support, starting with Stephen? What would you bring to Washington?
Well, the first thing that we need to do is stop illegal immigration. We need to enforce. There are plenty of laws on the books that are not being enforced. Another example of the president ignoring the fact that he doesn't get to make the law, that's Congress's job. It's a national security issue, not just an immigration issue. We need to close the border. This country was built by folks who came here legally, who followed the rules, who worked, and paid taxes. And I have no problem with folks coming here legally. That's a great thing. That's an asset. But they need to come here legally. We need to dry up the incentive for people to come here illegally in terms of the welfare state, getting illegal aliens using social services and so forth. We need to stop that and dry up that incentive. That'll help us. But we also do need to close the border.
And Howie Lind.
Let me just, before I get to illegal immigration, I'm just going to follow up real quick on the opening statements. I've known Barbara Comstock a long time. This is not about personal friendships. Our country is broken, and establishments in Washington, the establishment of Republicans, are enabling Barack Obama to continue to break our country. That's why I'm running for this seat. Illegal immigration. Secure the border, we got to do that. The broken visa system. 40% of the illegals in this country are running around with expired visas. We don't have a tracking system for visas. It's just terrible. Back to the House of Representatives. Speaker John Boehner, Eric Cantor, and others are trying to ramrod through this amnesty bill with 198 Pelosi Democrats. No, that's not what we want as our leaders in Washington. So again, taking a stand so that our leaders can take a stand in Washington to fight back, not just that, Obamacare, the military cuts, all those, but illegal immigration. I'm to do with cutting it back and having a humane solution for what to do with the illegals here, but we got to stop the illegal inflow first. Thank you.
And Delegate Bob Marshall.
We have a 1,950-mile border with Mexico. Congress promised a number of years ago to put a wall, just like the Israelis did, to protect themselves from terrorist attacks. They have not finished that wall. They have just done everything except do the work. I wrote all 4 border state governors from California to Texas, urging them to set up nonprofit entities to build the wall themselves. Didn't get anywhere, but if I were a congressman, I would put an amendment on one of the budgets to say, you can build the wall to engineering standards to keep illegal immigrants out of the United States. I would also put a budget amendment on telling Barack Obama, if you don't enforce the law, we're cutting money for your executive office, we're cutting money for every one of the agencies that you would be using to fund these projects. He obviously doesn't need the money if he doesn't want to enforce the law. You've got to get him to spend the money that Congress says for the purpose that Congress says to spend it. The Democrats in 1974 compelled Richard Nixon, 72, compelled Richard Nixon to spend the money that they appropriated, called the Budget Empowerment and Control Act.
And March 7th.
Obviously, the very first thing we need to do is to secure the borders, not just somebody coming across the border for a better life, but because of terrorists that can very easily come across our border with weapons of mass destruction. And so no one misunderstands. I am completely against amnesty. No to amnesty. In 1986, when President Reagan was in office, we gave amnesty to 3 million illegal aliens, and at that time, we said no more. We are a nation of laws. No more means no more. We also need to reduce the number of legal immigrants coming into this country because they take jobs away from the people that are already here. Right now, we're roughly 1 million a year coming in. We need to reduce that to somewhere around 250,000 until we can get things under control. Thank you.
And Rob Walsinger.
Let me tell you a quick story. When I worked in the Senate for conservative hero Sam Brownback, I worked very closely with Sandy and Connie Mackey, who's here, on a woman that was up for the head of consular affairs at the State Department. Maura Hardy was her name. And at the time, this was about a year after 9/11, and she wanted to run the visa program for the United States of America. We asked her a question. We said, Maura, what happened on 9/11? How did they get in? What was wrong with the visas? And she admitted to us that she hadn't even reviewed what happened that day, what happened with the visas. And I can tell you, if that doesn't tell you the whole system's broken, I don't know what does. Our whole system needs to be revamped. The visa program, we need to lock down the border, make sure it's secure. We can't grant amnesty to people who've got here illegally. We are a country of laws, and we need to respect the rule of law. Thank you.
All right, and the next question, and this one goes first to Howie Lind. We will come this way and end up back with Stephen Hollinghead at the end of this round. This question comes from Mark in Gainesville. It's like a radio show. It's Mark in Gainesville. Who asks, are you willing to commit unambiguously to rebuilding the strength of our military? I'm guessing he might be a veteran or perhaps active duty. And while on the topic of national security, the self-declared mission of the Muslim Brotherhood is, quote, destroying Western civilization from within and within the United States. In pursuing this goal, it, the Muslim Brotherhood, promotes the supremacist Islamic doctrine of Sharia law through various front groups and mosques, including some that are in this very congressional district. If elected to Congress, what are you going to do about it?
Great question. I'm the only military veteran in this race, so military, national defense, foreign policy are very strong issues for me. We are in a very weakened state right now. Our country, we are basically spectators on the world stage, as I call it. We're just watching things happen. We have no influence anywhere. So yes, rebuilding the military, national defense, I will hope to be on that, and the Armed Services Committee to do just that. The Islamic threat, Frank Gaffney, Stephen Coghlan, and Diana West were at my house a year ago in McLean on a specific topic of Sharia law. Open it up to just send a bunch of emails out, pack the house with a lot of you were here at that time listening to this huge threat that is undergoing within our country right now. We have a huge Islamic threat within our borders. It needs to be taken care of. So I will, yes, be on top of national security, foreign policy, and the Islamic threat. Thank you.
As a state legislator, I introduced a bill basically along the lines of American law for American courts, and that the legislature would be in charge of what foreign law would be accepted. Nobody else. We have contracts. If you want to have a contract according to Iranian law, let the legislature decide who's going to do that, not an unelected judge who decides to make policy on their own. We have been pursuing policy since the Clinton administration, where we intervened in civil wars and set up people, as we did in Kosovo, who are not very friendly to us. You need to go back to 1380, when the Serbs were fighting the Turks, and look at also the Battle of Lepanto. This is a long-term proposition. This president is now funding Al-Qaeda operatives in Syria. There needs to be a budget amendment to say, Mr. President, do not give aid and comfort to our enemies with this. Did he forget to 9/11? We should not be arming people in this civil war.
Mark 7.
National security inside this country and also outside this country for Americans that are abroad is our top priority. With all the problems we have in this country today, this has to be our top priority. As to the Muslim Brotherhood and Sharia law, we've all heard news stories where fathers have killed their daughters because they've dishonored the family and so forth. This is absolutely absurd. This is the United States of America. We shouldn't even consider something like Sharia law in this country. I know there are some localities in this country that are considering it. They ought to be ashamed of themselves, and they ought to be stopped by all means possible. Thank you very much.
I'm the type of limited government Republican that thinks the government should build our roads and defend our country and get out of our lives. And that's what we need to get back to, is those basics. So I support cutting a lot of government spending a lot of ways and putting it back in defense. Defense and Homeland Security has been very flexible and agile since 9/11. They have protected us. We haven't had a repeat of 9/11 here. And that's something that's very important. So we need to keep modernizing our military and our defense system so that we're ready at any point in time. Obviously, we need to take on the threat of Islamic terrorism wherever, whenever it occurs, whether it's internationally or here at home. And I think a lot of the people in the defense and Homeland Security industry are doing exactly that. Thank you.
On this round, we start with Bob Marshall. First,
You know what you missed?
oh, I apologize. Came down here and I stopped.
He made a pass anyway.
I'm terribly sorry.
Good question.
Thanks.
Oops.
Of course, it's the case that that judges have no business importing foreign laws into their consideration in our courts. It's happened before this was a problem. It was a problem with importing some French laws and so forth. So judges need not to do that. We need to fight terrorism, no question. We also need to do a better job of explaining the American way and the principles of freedom and limited government that made this country great in the first place, and to have people learn what to assimilate into the American way of life, learn what it means to be an American, and immigrants for generations have done that and have been proud of the American way. So we need to do a better job of reaching out and explaining the principles of Western civilization to our own new arrivals.
This one goes to Bob Marshall to start with. And the question comes from Marion Fairfax, who asked about the removal of the Virginia Attorney General, as he has stated that he will not uphold the laws of Virginia concerning same-sex marriages. Do you support traditional marriage and other traditional values, such as the life issue? And do you think that private companies should have to, that is, to be forced to provide insurance that includes abortion-inducing chemicals, and so on? Do you think that state and federal taxes should be spent on abortion?
Way back, a friend of mine and I devised what became the Hyde Amendment. It passed, which cut off federal funding of abortions. I did the same thing for Congressman Bob Dornan in the area of military, District of Columbia, and foreign affairs. I have filed a bar complaint against Mark Herring for his perfidious disgusting treatment of the citizens of Virginia in not just refusing to uphold the Constitution of Virginia, but in attacking the Constitution of Virginia. He had no business doing this. He could not have read the decisions that he claims to have read, Loving versus Virginia, because it assumes marriage is only between one man and one woman. I've introduced legislation to block the federal government from compelling businesses and little sisters of the poor from having to buy abortion pills. One opponent who's not here today opposed me twice on those amendments. You should not force conscience. The First Amendment was made for conscience from James Madison. This is the state that originated this, but the gutless Republican leadership in Congress and in Richmond doesn't want to confront this. I do.
Mark 7.
It's funny that Bob got that question first. You said this wasn't rigged.
Mary's my cousin.
As far as our Attorney General, the Attorney General takes an oath of office to uphold the laws of this state and the Constitution. The Attorney General failed. The Attorney General may not like having to defend certain laws, but it doesn't matter. That's his job. It's like a defense attorney or a public defender who's asked to defend somebody who is been accused of murder. They may know that person's guilty of murder or believe it is, but they still have an obligation under the law to do their job, and he failed to do it, and he should be removed. As far as private companies providing funding for abortion and anything related to that, they shouldn't have to do that. I'm completely opposed to that. Thank you.
Address the question of life, pro-life.
Oh, I'm definitely pro-life.
Do you think it's something that will become a legislative issue?
It's already, if you go to Roe versus Wade, which is 41 years ago, it's already been decided by the Supreme Court, and I think what would have to happen in order for that to change is we're going to have a very strong majority in the United States Senate, to have the House of Representatives, and also the White House. But if you look back during the Bush administration, we had that, and we failed to take action at that time. I think it was a missed opportunity.
And it would also require likely another court challenge that would bring it to the Supreme Court as well. Rob Walsinger.
Thank you. I'm 100% pro-life, and I think it's an absolute crime that anybody's money, state, federal, local tax revenue, would ever be used to fund abortion. So I completely oppose the use of tax dollars for abortion. When I worked in the Senate with Brownback, we put together the Human Cloning Prohibition Act, which became model legislation all across the country to stop therapeutic cloning, as proponents of cloning called it, and also to stop embryonic stem cell research. And we opposed the Bush administration because on August 9th, they made a decision that would compel us to use our tax money to pay for destructive human embryonic research at the National Institutes of Health. That decision was wrong, and I think what we're looking for in our next congressman is someone that's going to fight the administration, Republican or Democrat, fight the establishment, and do the right thing, regardless of the consequences. We need strong leadership. Thank you.
And on the question of the Virginia Attorney General.
I think the Virginia Attorney General has been an absolute disgrace. He has an oath of office that he needs to uphold. Marriage is between a man and a woman. I think that's very straightforward and obvious. And I think his actions have been disgraceful.
Stephen.
I agree with everyone up here that Mark Herring needs to be removed. A man can't keep his oath for 3 weeks. 2 weeks. I'm sorry, Bob. I stand corrected, Bob. But the notion that I do want to, Mrs. Comstock's not here to answer for herself. I do want to point out one lack of judgment on this abortion thing, where she cast the only vote in 2013 that the National Abortion Rights Action League wanted, and so she got 100% on their scorecard for the year 2013. Which was to leave abortion coverage in Virginia's Obamacare exchange. That was a grievous lack of judgment on her part. look, nobody, we shouldn't, whatever happened to live and let live in America anyway? All this, we're making nuns pay for birth control coverage? Seriously? I mean, you know, why don't we just let people buy their own stuff instead of forcing everybody to pay for it? I'll be happy to follow up on the issue of life, if you like. I have 6 daughters and 7 sons, many of whom are here. But I don't think that my lovely wife is right there. You can wave, Jan. She's the mother of 13. I don't think there's anybody who understands how precious every human life is than my wife and me. Thanks. Not even Wassinger can catch up. Keep trying, keep trying.
Howie, this comes up a lot, numbers I can't talk. I've only got 4. They're grown. I have 2 beautiful little granddaughters, but we'll let Rob talk about it. I'm pro-life, all the way, 100% pro-life. Strongly traditional marriage between a man and a woman. Mark Herring should be impeached. I mean, that's outrageous. He did. You know what he did. Let me, since we're talking Attorney General, let's talk for a minute about Eric Holder, okay? Because that's another person who should be impeached. That is just. You probably saw it this morning. In the last couple of days, these IRS finally they're getting some, steam behind having some hearings or locking up Lois Lerner or others that should be locked up for this IRS. Furious. There's other scandals, the NSA, that need to be looked into. Nothing's happening. Eric Holder should go. Thank you.
I think Howie covered everything. We're ready to go home, right?
The next question, we begin with you, Mark Savage. Make sure, I want to pause there, make sure you guys will keep me honest, I'm sure. And this one comes from Bob in Percival. It's not you, Bob, right?
He's a dual address.
And Bob asked, you may remember a certain Texas governor at a presidential debate said that he had 3 governmental departments and agencies that he wanted to do away with, but he can only remember 2 of them. What 3 governmental departments or agencies would you hope to eliminate if the opportunity presents itself? Will you support a bill to do so, to eliminate government agencies? And how else would you significantly cut federal spending given the debt crisis now at $17.5+ trillion?
Well, can we get rid of the executive branch? Place that would go. 3 federal agencies. HUD would be the first one, Energy would be the second one, and Education would be the third one. As far as where to cut additional spending, this country sends billions and billions of dollars a year to foreign countries that hate us and wish to do us harm. And what we need to do is stop, take care of ourselves first, and protect our allies. But as far as those other countries, take Afghanistan as a perfect example. President Karzai over there has put billions of dollars into his pocket, and this needs to stop. And we can save a lot of money by doing that. Thank you.
Yeah, I have kind of 4 targets: commerce, energy, education, of course, and also housing and urban development. All of these agencies have become wasteful. There's a lot of corporate kickbacks. They're screwing up our education system. I definitely support a bill to eliminate those. And we do need to go further. Looking at government spending, there's a program NASA runs. It costs $300,000 a year. It's called the Green Ninja. It's a little YouTube video of this little green ninja that goes and teaches school children about global warming. Which is absurd. I mean, you can't even make this stuff up. And you know, we always think it's the Democrats that go out and support this garbage. But the fact of the matter is, it's establishment Republicans supporting this garbage. They're all in it together. There's no difference between Democrats and Republicans in Washington, D.C. And we need to start fighting, and we need to start fighting now.
And Stephen Hollingshead.
Well, as a former educator, I think the best thing we can do for education in the United States is to eliminate the Department of Education. That saves us $80 million a year, but even more importantly, it prevents this whole idea of a top-down, one-size-fits-all approach with tassel-over bureaucrats on the Washington Mall running our education system. Education belongs to parents, and it belongs to local officials, if at all. While we're dismantling Carter-era agencies, we could go right over to the Department of Energy. The little bits of it that need to be retained can go back to the Department of Defense where they came from. We can also, my former agency, and sorry friends, but HUD needs to be eliminated as well, because this is a local issue. Nothing in the Constitution says that we need to be in housing at the federal level. So, but we do need to get back, we need to yank back on spending in every part of the government and make sure that the private sector grows faster than the government sector.
Howie Lynn, I'll start off with the EPA. The Employment Prevention Agency, again, it just comes out jobs across the country. Department of Education, we've already mentioned that, but the Common Core, I mean, that's terrible. That's Obamacare for education. Do away with that. IRS, the Internal Revenue Service, is a punitive political organization. Make it a postcard, make it simple. We don't need that. Let me just, since we're on this about government agencies, the militarization of the non-defense federal agencies. It's terrible. Every single agency has its own little army. The Bureau of Land Management in Nevada has snipers. You just heard about that. Snipers, BLMs. What? That's outrageous. All right, so cutting back, yes, we need to cut back. $17.5 trillion debt. John Boehner came in 4 years ago as Speaker, it was $14 trillion. Now it's gone up $3.5 trillion. Okay, John, time to go. Thank you.
And Delegate Bob Marshall.
You know, it's easy to say that you have a goal that you want to drive somewhere, but how do you get there if you don't have a car, you don't have a bike, you don't even have a rickshaw? Well, the only bills that you're going to really deal with on a practical level are the appropriations bills. A bill cutting DOE is not going to get out of committee, but every year they've got to vote the appropriations bills. What I would do is as follows. In 2007, spending at the federal level was $2.73 trillion. Revenue this year is $2.8 trillion. Every appropriation bill I would take and match now the spending that was back in 2007. Every time I do that, I would hope to get a vote on these spending cuts so you can see who is serious about this. I go to undermine the assumptions of my enemy. I'm suing right now the University of Virginia for the papers of Michael Mann, who's the godfather of this stupid global warming and this cap on all carbon-based medicine. I would put an amendment on NSA to say, no spying, or Mr. Clapper, get a job that you work for.
The next question, we start with Rob Wasinger. And the question comes from Laverne in Lovettsville. I wonder if any people that put the questions in are here.
Don't call me Shirley.
This one is not too tough, I think. Will you support the Constitution and the separation of powers, which the current person living in the White House refuses to acknowledge? And what would you do as a member of Congress to combat the abuse of power that we see in so many different forms these days, such as the IRS targeting of the president's political enemies?
Yeah, absolutely. We need to restore the separation of powers. This president has abused it like no other president before. Even when it comes to his own signature legislation, Obamacare, Whenever he doesn't like the end dates, he simply moves them, usually for political realities. Democrats are running scared on the issue of Obamacare, and they don't want to have to face it in the midterm this year. So he just keeps pushing the deadlines back so that most of the impact comes after the elections. These things, he can't just unilaterally decide what the law is going to be and then disregard everything else. Another thing is with DOJ and Defense of Marriage Act. He decided he wasn't going to enforce that. That's not his decision to make. Congress makes the laws, and he's